Can we blame food companies for why it's difficult to be successful on your New Year's resolution to lose weight? Oh yeah, you bet we can. Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Come follow me. I'm right here on Instagram. The username Jimmy Rants. Go look it up on Instagram. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being here today, you guys. We're also simulcasting on my Facebook page where Sally just popped in. Hello, Sally, and all the rest of my Facebookers. And as well as over here on Twitch where I see Kelly says good morning and Marcus says hello. Southern Clean Living says she just made the switch to Twitch. I like that, Southern Clean Living. Make the switch to Twitch because there's some crazy stuff going on some of the other social media. So I really do like this Twitch format. If all you know what breaks loose on Instagram, I will be going to Twitch to originate this show. So thank you guys for being here today. If you happen to miss the live, you can watch it on the replay right here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. It'll be on IGTV there. I do post a little 15-minute snippet over on my Living Low Carb Man page, but the full shebang is right here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. It's also going to be housed over on Twitch, so if you do sign up for Twitch and you don't watch live, you can always watch the replays over here on Twitch. You can also watch the replays over on YouTube, which unfortunately is still not allowing me to go live stream, but if you're watching this on the replay on YouTube, this is the Instagram feed that you're watching, but unfortunately, YouTube is not letting me live stream, so I'm not sure what's going on there. And of course, if the world comes to an end and all else fails, you will always be able to get all the past episodes over at JimmyRants.com. That's my website. That's on my server, and by golly, nobody's going to delete these videos over there. Okay, you guys, welcome. Thanks for being here today on Jimmy Rants. I got a really fantastic article to read for you here today from the New York Times, a really interesting article from this author who I'll tell you about here in a minute. But have you ever wondered why so many people fail when they have a New Year's resolution to lose weight? Because it seems inevitable. I mean, a lot of people in our society, they just inevitably assume you go on some kind of a diet on January the 1st. I did. 17 years ago, I did. You go on some kind of a diet January 1st, and the expectation is that you won't last more than a few weeks. And if you do gut it out, it's only a few more weeks after that. And by mid-February, you're off the rails and you're back to your crappy diet again. Have you ever stopped to wonder why? Like, I think most of us know why. And what I'm going to be sharing in this article may not be breaking news, but I think it gets into a little more of the methodicalness of how this was planned and the mechanics of why people can't seem to be successful when they try to do a New Year's resolution to lose weight. And part of it is big food has overtaken our food supply. If you hadn't noticed, pop into any grocery store, and all you got to do is go through the middle aisles, and you will see fake food after fake food after fake food. I like to refer to these things that they call food as food-like disease agents, because literally they're food-like. They're not real food. Cavemen would not know what to do with these things that we call food today. They don't know what a Dorito is. They don't know what a Ding Dong is. They don't know what Coca-Cola is. They don't know what Sour Patch Kids is. They don't know what to do with any of that stuff. It would be way, way, way too sweet, too hyper palatable. They might get a rush out of it and go, oh, and then start having the addiction process, but they don't recognize it as food. And yet that's what has dominated. And have you ever asked yourself the question, why has all that food, which is obviously unhealthy to everybody, I don't think anybody thinks potato chips and cookies and cakes and snack cakes and all the little things that are sold as food in America, I don't think anybody looks at those things and says, wow, that's really healthy. Nobody! But guess what? They've gotten a free pass. all the big food manufacturers, a free pass on all this processed food. And because of the free pass, and I would say not just a free pass, they've been given a license to promote their food, because guess what they've done simultaneously to promoting these foods? They have also vilified saturated fat, a real food. They have vilified red meat, a real food. They vilify all protein sources, a real food. And so when you vilify real food, people look at the options that are left. Okay, I can't have meat, so am I supposed to eat a bunch of vegetables? But I know I get hungry eating a bunch of vegetables. I don't really want to eat a bunch of vegetables. So what's left? And that's when they go into the processed foods. I just had a really fascinating conversation just this morning for an upcoming episode of one of my podcasts with Lisa Wiederman. She is an eye doctor, carnivore doctor, right here on Instagram. And we were talking pretty extensively about kind of the addictive property of ultra processed foods and sugar specifically, and foods that turn to sugar in the body. It's just, these are the things, guys, that they've gotten away with it for so long that consumers are none the wiser. And so if you're just joining us, I'm about to read from a New York Times article. This just came out on January 9th. And it's all about why we are doomed to not be successful on a New Year's resolution to lose weight. You're doomed to not be successful by design, by the food companies. And so this was written, you guys. I love this guy, Mark Bittman, Bittman. I would love to interview him on my podcast if I could get a hold of him. But he's got a new book coming out called Animal Vegetable Junk. That's the name of the book. And so he wrote this op-ed piece for the New York Times, January 9th, why your New Year's diet is doomed. It's a struggle between you and the big food companies and marketers who sell you junk, and you're set up to lose. So let's get into the article. Nearly all of us will fail at our annual round of New Year's resolutions, which historically are led by eating better and losing weight. Let's dig into that a little bit. I want to hear from you. Why do you think so many people get really excited right after Christmas? They say, okay, this is going to be the year. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I want to hear what you have to say as to why people who have that much motivation, they put it into action starting January the 1st. And then by mid-January or at the latest mid-February, they fail miserably. What's your theory as to why you think that happens? And I'll definitely come to your comments here in just a minute. But the struggle for your health is not a battle between you and the scale or you and the brownies. Excessive weight is a symptom, Mark writes, not laziness, not stupidity, not a lack of discipline, but of a food system that thrives on pushing you junk. Think about your entire life. Think about all the imagery that you have seen promoted to you on television. Think about all of the food marketing in grocery stores when you've walked in. Think about food culture in general. Anywhere you see food being served, it's almost always some form of crap. I remember going to the carnival when I was a kid, and the big thing was the funnel cakes. And then as I got older, and I guess the past 15, 20 years, it's been like deep frying things like the deep fried Oreo cookie, the deep fried banana, they deep fried everything. And so you see that kind of thing, and what it has done is normalize those things as food. Those things were never food. And so people have gotten a distortion of what food is. But I love that he's pointing out, it's not you against the scale and you against the crappy garbage food that you eat. Your excessive weight on your body is actually a symptom, not of laziness, not of your stupidity, not of a lack of discipline, which is what culture tells us all the time. Oh, if you're fat, you're lazy, you're stupid, and you don't have any self-discipline. If you only had those things, you wouldn't have the weight on your body. But he's underscoring that the food system itself thrives on pushing you junk. The struggle is real. It's between you and the big food marketers that sell you junk, their most profitable products, and the politicians who enable them. Guys, whether you know it or not, there is a very seedy relationship between the big money that is made from these processed junk foods, which pretty much is some derivative of wheat and grains, some derivative of sugar and sugar-like products, and some derivative of a vegetable oil. 3 very inexpensive, highly profitable items to put in crappy garbage. They put it in there, and what costs them pennies to make, they make dollars off of every penny that they make. And it adds up to billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, which is why when they set up a new junk food, not only do they put the money that they potentially think they're going to make into the product itself to make it look as pretty as possible. Even like as people have become more health conscious, they use health terminology like all natural, organic, good for you, blah, 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 blah. I think the funniest one was when I saw Fruit Loops. And on the front of the packaging, it says, a good source of vitamin D. And so I turn it over on the back and I'm going, what is a good source? It had 200 IU of vitamin D. I currently, with the virus out there, take about 25,000 IU. Normally I take around 10,000, but 200 they said was a good source of vitamin D. They're just playing the game, guys. And these marketers, they are very, very good. They know how to push the buttons. Yes, Joshua says heart healthy. If I see another Cheerios box that has the stupid American heart health symbol and it's great for your heart to lower your cholesterol, I'm going to puke. But those things are out there. They slap those labels on there, and guess what? America's just slurp it right up and go, yes, please, more. And then we wonder why we struggle with addiction. We wonder why we struggle with the battle of the bulge. And we wonder why, after all these years of trying to do something to lose weight and get healthy, we simply can't do it. Big food has a powerful part in that story. Those of you that just joined us, we are talking about big food and how they have gotten a free pass on their processed foods, and how those things were always designed to make you fat and keep you fat, and to make it a struggle when you try to go lose weight for a New Year's resolution. So this is an article in the New York Times called Why Your New Year's Diet is Doomed. The author, Mark Bittman, has an upcoming book called Animal Vegetable Junk. So we're reading from his op-ed piece in the New York Times. The war began in earnest in the second half of the 20th century with the development of what we now call ultra-processed foods. So the second half of the 20th century was 1950s on. So we had just come out of World War II, and they were trying to figure out ways to ramp up manufacturing, to bring back jobs to America, and da-da-da. So I think big food companies had a good heart about the why. Unfortunately, profitability wasn't the only thing they needed to pay attention to. Nobody had the foresight to think that if you thrust this new ingredient of highly processed grains, highly processed sugars, in circa early 70s, highly processed high fructose corn syrup really got into the food supply in the early 70s. When all of these things came along, they didn't think about the ramifications of what would happen in the years to come. And then especially when they promote the dietary guidelines for Americans beginning in 1980, and those guidelines set forth eating low fat. Well, when you cut fat, you pretty much have to cut out most foods that would be considered healthy, because a lot of the healthy foods, butter, lard, coconut oil, full fat meats and cheeses, that kind of thing, all of that is removed from the diet, you're left with no other choice than to choose these other, quote, healthy foods. So the ultra-processed foods, new creations totally stripped of all the nutrients combined with sugar and other artificial ingredients. And I saw my friend Temple, the ketogenic nutritionist here on Instagram, just before I came on Jimmy Ranch, she posted on her stories about the difference between a box of cereal, I think it was Fruit Loops actually, in America versus in Europe. And the difference was stark because in Europe, they don't allow all these food dyes and chemicals and other artificial ingredients. But in America, red dye number 6 and blue dye number 1, it's just all of these things that they allow in our food supply that's not allowed anywhere else in the whole world. Those things proliferate in America. These are products that, as the Brazilian scientist Carlos Monteiro and his colleagues say, contain ingredients that are, quote, never or rarely used in kitchens, end quote. So if they're putting things into our food, I just hate calling processed foods food because it's not food to me. Crappy garbage is definitely what I call it. If they don't even use it in kitchens, why are we eating it? I'll tell you what, like sometimes I will get things from vendors that will just send me stuff unsolicited. And the first thing I do is open it up and throw it to my backyard chickens. And if my backyard chickens won't even touch it, that's kind of my telltale sign of, yeah, I'm not going to put that in my mouth. Now, sometimes it's got legit ingredients, but if it's truly a good product, they will eat the crap out of it. But if they don't, they don't. The development of these ultra-processed foods wasn't inevitable, and it certainly wasn't progress. But listen to this. It was made super profitable by a combination of an excess amount of grains, advanced manufacturing techniques, a retail system that made shelf life a higher priority than quality or nutrition. And that shelf life thing is so important, you guys. If they can pump out an obligate amount of product very, very, very fast, and then it can sit on a shelf upwards of 1 to 2 years, they can keep pumping that out. And the higher production then allows them to lower the price in the store, which helps get it out, get it into people's cupboards. Then they start eating that. They get highly addicted to that. They go back, and that 10 for $10 Little Debbie snack cakes that you got addicted to, you're going to buy 10 more boxes, if not 20 more boxes. You're going to eat those, and then it's going to stoke you to keep going back and back and back and back. You see how we get fat? You see how we get sick? You see how all of this ties together? And a general failure to limit corporate consolidation. And I posted in promoting this particular Jimmy Rants today on my stories and on my social media pages, I posted a picture of the 10 companies. Guys, if you didn't know this, listen up. 10 companies in the entire world own all of the food that they sell you in grocery stores, all the processed foods. 10 companies. Big names, you would know them, Nestle. I could go down the line, but you can look up that graphic. Just look up food companies around the world, and you'll see a graphic on Google Images. It's disgusting. 10 companies own everything, and so they've conglomerated and consolidated all these food companies. Even the weight loss companies, guys. Slim Fast is owned by a junk food company. Almost every single thing out there that's consumable other than real food is owned by one of these 10 companies. It's gross. The dominance of these ultra-processed foods took hold during the 70s. Guess what? I was a little bitty munchkin in the 70s. And little did I know what was being set up for me. So the junk food companies ramped up in the 70s. Along comes the dietary guidelines for Americans in 1980. I remember being an elementary school student and having to memorize that dietary guidelines. And all the food companies were like, oh boy, we got these guidelines now telling people to eat, 8 to 12 servings of grains a day. So let's accentuate, it's made with healthy whole grains. And that's where that whole mantra came from. And it became so much a part of our lives. And so my mama was the queen of low-fat diets. She went on low-fat diet after low-fat diet, eating basically plastic, garbage, cardboard stuff. And it was gross tasting food because it had no fat in it. And then all these junk foods were out there. And it just became a part of Americana. The whole westernized food thing, there's the genesis of it. So when they did that, the ultra-processed foods taking hold in the 70s, the gradual piling on of work and the resulting lack of personal time. So people started working more. They didn't really take vacations. A lot of things happened. And it made real home cooking difficult or impossible. So remember, this happened in the 70s, headed into the 80s. And this is where the turn happens. Look at every graphic of chronic disease that has taken place in America. When did it start to go up and up and up with type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease? It was 1980. And so a combination of this promotion of ultra-processed, highly addicted foods, also having this dietary guidelines for Americans promoted to people to eat less fat and eat more grains, it was a recipe for disaster. And here we are in 2021, 40 years later, over 40 years later, and we're still dealing with the ramifications of that. So if you went on a New Year's resolution to lose weight, you're only going to get so far because these foods are designed to make you fat and sick and keep you fat and sick. Nowadays, more than half of our total calories come from ultra-processed foods. Well, they don't come from most of our most of our diets because we don't eat those things anymore. Although I would warn you about if you're keto, about the processed foods that are in the keto world. Like those things count as well. Some people say, well, it's made with almond flour. That's legal. Yeah, on occasion, I suppose. But you kind of set yourself up for if you take a bite of that. Does it stoke something in your brain to want to go back to those ultra-processed foods? Like it's something to just know thyself, know how you respond. And if you can have those things and it be on occasion and not be a big deal to you, great. The problem is most of us go into keto or carnivore or some of the real food type of diet because we had a highly addictive past because of these ultra-processed foods that Mark's talking about. So we have half of our total calories from ultra-processed foods, and our ancestors, no matter where they're from, would never recognize the diet of today. They wouldn't. They would have no idea. In the last quarter of the 20th century, the number of calories consumed in snacks nearly doubled. So that's since 1975. The amount of calories from snacks nearly doubled. Mama used to keep little snacks around all the time in the 1980s when I was a kid. And yeah, I'm not surprised. She would buy like Ritz crackers or Oreo cookies, and we would have one or two, but then we'd have 10 or 20. And me and my older brother Kevin, 4 years older than me, we would devour stuff. And Mama would come home and be like, what happened to the cookies I bought? Oh, well, we ate them. Well, you're not supposed to eat the whole thing. Well, they were good, and we were hungry. Well, I can't buy more Oreos till next week now. And so it was kind of that constant battle of she didn't realize we were highly addicted, that we wanted those highly palatable foods. And that was the start of my journey of gaining weight. We tend to blame fast food restaurants for our poor eating habits. I don't think fast food franchises have the sole blame for this, but they certainly are a part of it. Much of what's now consumed at home is ultra-processed. So yes, there it is. A lot of the junk food that you buy in stores. And I think part of what's making it hard today, you guys, did you go to Costco or Sam's Club when all of 9-1 DIVOC started last year? Did you see what people were piling in not just little packages, but big old industrial size of potato chips and snack cakes and dang, you name it. It was just everywhere. and people just gobbled that stuff up. The result has been an average weight gain for adults of more than 24 pounds between 1960 and 2002. And it came along with an epidemic of chronic disease, namely type 2 diabetes, and now the number one killer in America, it's not 9-1-DIVOC, it's heart disease. In short, most of us are overweight. And losing that weight is so difficult because we're set up to eat too much food that's high in calories and bereft of nutrients. Have you stopped to think about why you binge eat and why you got to that point where you did binge eat? Okay, so if you start thinking through that and realizing the hormonal effects of all that ultra-processed foods, it makes sense, right? Like you get there. But then you go to even a ketogenic or carnivore diet. What happens when you start on one of those diets? You tend to eat a commensurate amount of those foods as the processed junk foods that you used to eat. And maybe inadvertently you overconsume those. Not because you're trying to, not because of anything else other than your brain is now hardwired to want to eat and eat and eat. And I'll be the first to admit to you, when I went on the Atkins diet in 2004, that was the biggest challenge. Was I was used to having piles of food. I mean, piles upon piles in the thousands of calories a day, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 calories a day. And so when I went on the Atkins diet, it was hard for me not to want to have 3,000, 3,500 calories. Now, that was less than what I was eating before, but it was still quite a bit for trying to induce weight loss. Now, thankfully, I did induce weight loss. I did actually, at some point, realize, okay, let me titrate back a bit on the calories. I didn't fully understand the hormonal effect at the time. Let me titrate back. And I noticed hunger at that point. And so then I started trying to find that balance. What's enough food to take away the hunger, but not so much food that then I'm in a surplus, blah, blah, blah. So I was playing all those games when I first started on the Atkins diet. But that's why we're set up to fail. We're used to eating highly palatable foods, which triggers in our brain, when you eat a lot. When you eat, you binge. And that's real for a lot of people. Not everybody, but for a lot of people. This new highly processed diet is believed to have chronic disease, or cause, chronic disease, led by insulin resistance, which I've quoted this before. Go look up the study. There was a study done recently, within the past year or two, that said 88% of Americans have some semblance of insulin resistance. It could be very, very light, or it could be very, very heavy, but all of us in that 88% are on some level of insulin resistance, meaning when you eat food, your body does not respond appropriately. You should be able to eat pretty much any food. You have kind of the little bit of a spike in blood sugar, it comes back down, and it's normal within 2 hours postprandial. That means you're insulin sensitive. 88% of people don't have that response. And some people, not just a little spike, but a big spike, and then a big crash, and then you're all over the board. And it also, in turn, causes type 2 diabetes, a precursor to cardiovascular disease. Now, I've said this before. Insulin resistance is the disease, guys. There is no type 2 diabetes. There is no heart disease. There is no Alzheimer's. There is no cancer. All of those things that we call various diseases, they're all the exact same disease. It's the disease of insulin resistance. And so when you realize the disease is insulin resistance, then you treat the insulin resistance. And the manifestation of the insulin resistance showing up as type 2 diabetes, showing up as heart disease, showing up as cancer and Alzheimer's and all the rest, PCOS, then you can deal with it. Then you can deal with it appropriately. I think what we've done, compartmentalizing and dividing all of these manifestations of insulin resistance into different diseases, has been a great disservice to patients. And so I'm all about trying to get to the root cause of things. And the root cause in this case is definitely insulin resistance. Most people in the United States have at least one chronic disease, and nearly half of Americans have two. And those diseases are responsible for over 70% of all deaths in the United States annually. More than 1.7 million per year. Yeah, I was looking at the heart disease statistics. 700,000 people died last year of heart disease. Now, I know 9-1 Divock's gotten all the attention the past year, but far more people die of heart disease than they have of 9-1 Divock. Far more people have complications of type 2 diabetes that lead to death than some of these other things that we talk about. So it's like, let's get our priorities straight. Let's look at what the real pandemic actually is. And it's this, and it's all related to this ultra-processed food consumption. That's why when all this went down last year, little side rant, they should have been telling people, stop eating the junk food. But guess what, guys? These government leaders could not do it because they get paid very handsomely by these food companies to keep their big, fat mouths shut. It's why these salacious bedfellows between big food, big pharma, and government entities is gross. And if people even knew, well, they don't talk about real food because they got people paying them to peddle the junk food. They don't want to talk about things that actually make you healthy. And then big pharma would take a hit. They got to keep making their billions, you guys. And that's not a jaded position. That's based on empirical data over at least the past 16 years that I've been online. That's exactly what they're doing, exactly what has happened here. 9-1 Divock pales in comparison to these killers. They've also shortened our average lifespan. And think about quality of life. Someone at the end of life with heart disease, someone at the end of life where they have amputations because of type 2 diabetes. That's no way to live. Meanwhile, the dominant food corporations happily spread this deadly diet around the world. They get the free pass, guys. Why? Why? My whole career I've been asking, why does sugar get such a health halo? And supposedly red meat is the killer of all killers in our diet? It's never made sense to me. Why would you vilify real food and glorify junk food? Glorify by not saying a damn thing about it. It's glorifying it. They don't say anything. Now, thank God we have people like Dr. Robert Lustig, Gary Taubes, and many other people, Dr. Mark Hyman, all shining a bright light on the effects of sugar and foods that turn to sugar in the body, as to why we're dealing with so many chronic health problems and obesity. But the leaders from on high that could actually do something about it, this is why the 2020 dietary guidelines that just came out were so woefully inept. It's more same old, because the big food companies, namely Coca-Cola, get their grubby hands on the people who are making that policy. And it's all tied together. See, when you kind of connect the dots with all this stuff, it makes so much sense as to why things that seem so stupid are happening. Okay? To say the deck is stacked against those trying to fight these trends is an understatement. Just as casinos are designed for gamblers to lose, the food system evolved to become a carefully engineered con to coerce us to eat the very stuff that is at once most profitable for the food industry and most worst for our health. There are clearly winners and losers here. This is why every health claim you see on a food package, just automatically assume it's a lie. Or it's a half-truth, which is a lie as well. And don't ever make a food purchase based on what you read on the front of a package. Always. And I don't even look at the macronutrients first. My first eyeballs when I'm looking at anything like that, if I choose to have something like that, and more, I eat meat and cheeses and eggs, things that don't have a barcode, don't have ingredients, because the ingredient is beef, chicken, egg, like that's the ingredient. But if you do decide to veer into some of those other things, the first thing I do is turn on the back and look at the ingredients list. And I trip out now because keto has become so popular in our culture. And all the keto wraps, I saw some in the grocery store the other day. Very keto friendly on the front packaging. I'm like, all right, let's look on the back how keto friendly. The very first ingredient, no lie, very first ingredient, whole grain wheat. I'm like, you MFers. That ain't keto in any way at all. The way they got away with it, by the way, you guys, is the fiber that's in the grains, they subtracted, and it had 6 grams of net carbohydrates, which don't count net carbs, count total carbohydrate, and then you can't get in trouble. And that's how they got away with it. These whole grains are not designed to keep you in ketosis. Whole grains are highly inflammatory, going to spike your blood sugar and insulin levels. They're just bad news. And yet here is this keto-friendly wrap, and it's got a big old bolus of wheat and grains in it. The playbook for much of the junk food marketing is similar to what the tobacco industry used for decades. Advertising strategies focused on young people, a shirking of responsibility for poisoning entire populations, and an emphasis on individuals' responsibility for their own health. So I will agree, it is the responsibility of the individual to do what you want to do with your life. That's cool. The problem is people don't know they're being manipulated. They don't know they're being lied to. They don't know they're being heavily marketed to, like literally every turn they're being marketed to. And they don't realize what's going on. And so they don't want to hold any responsibility. Hey, we didn't force them to stab it down their mouth. McDonald's got in trouble for a few years there, right after that Super Size Me movie came out, Morgan Spurlock. Everybody thought, we need to blame McDonald's, and they're the reason for obesity. And McDonald's is like, we didn't force people to walk into our doors. We didn't shove the food down their mouth, which is true. But they did heavily advertise on television and all across media. And when I was a kid, McDonald's was heavily with Ronald McDonald, the clown. And it was designed to make you want to go in there and eat in the Happy Meal. And then when they came up with the whole having a meal deal, and oh my God, and then they teamed up with movies, and yeah, it became this marketing colossal blueprint for all the other junk food companies. Here's how you get people addicted. Unfortunately, ultra-processed foods aren't as readily condemned as tobacco. And I was talking with Lisa about this in our interview earlier. Part of that is drugs and cigarettes and things like that. They're not necessary. You can go your whole life and not have those things, but you have to eat. And so people see these food-like disease agents and they assume, oh, well, it's food, you got to eat. And so then when you vilify saturated fat, you vilify red meat, people are going to turn to things that aren't those things, and what they turn to are these processed foods, all under the guise that they're healthier. While we know that nicotine is addictive and that cigarettes deliver a range of carcinogens, there are many ways, yet not one single way, that the standard American diet increases the risk of other causes of premature death. Literally every chronic disease known to mankind, chronic disease, not acute. So if it's a chronic disease, it's something that develops over time. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, on and on and on and on and on. All of those things develop over time. Those are called chronic diseases. They're all tied to the ultra-processed foods. You cut those out, and you can eliminate your risk of developing those things. The intersection amongst calorie intake, exercise, fat accumulation on the body, insulin resistance, genetic background, along with environmental factors that cause diet-related diseases, things like stress and generational poverty, are variable and complicated. Man, I love that, because you're not just looking at diet. A lot of times people see someone that still has weight on the body and they will judge them and say, well, you're not eating right. Well, no, maybe I have a lack of exercise in my diet, which I can do about. Maybe I have fat accumulation. That makes it more difficult. Maybe I have insulin resistance. That makes it more difficult. Genetics, more difficult. Environmental factors like stress. I've been stressing stress a lot lately in my work because it's a biggie. Generational poverty. So when you're poor by design generationally, that's going to force you to be eating these crappier foods. It's a complicated question, which is not as easy as, well, just eat a good diet, eat real food, and everything will get better. This doesn't work that way axiomatically across the board. What is indisputable is that a better diet will lead to better health. And most people know that a good diet is one that cuts back on these ultra-processed foods and substitutes relatively unprocessed plant foods. That's what he puts. I think you can add some animal-based foods in there as well. On this, all responsible global experts agree. But knowledge and sound advice aren't enough. When most choices are destructive, it's hard to choose wisely. And between your knowledge and the execution of your wishes stands, listen to this, a $14 billion food advertising budget. Did you realize $14 billion annually is spent just on marketing their products to you? And you see it all the time. I literally could do one of the jingles. I could literally just go da 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 da, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. I don't even have to say the name brand. You already know it's the big arches. You already know that. And they're very good at that. And when they do that and they permeate our consciousness, they get in there, it makes you want to buy it. And they're paid very heavily to be able to figure out ways to convince you to eat foods that they know are going to be destructive for your health. The vast majority of which will promote the $14 billion, fast food, sugary drinks, all those polar bear commercials with Coca-Cola, especially in the 80s and 90s. That was by design. Candy and unhealthy snacks. The total budget of the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, listen to this, that total budget at the CDC for chronic disease prevention and health promotion, less than $1 billion. So the food companies spend 14 times that amount to promote something that's is the antithesis of what the CDC is trying to prevent. Thus, this is why you fail on your New Year's resolution to lose weight. Healthy food is out there, of course, but it's overwhelmingly marketed to a specific demographic, and this is sad. Healthier food is promoted to wealthier people, often white people, almost always adults. So white, rich adults, are they the only ones that buy healthy food? The imagery out there is, well, healthy food is expensive. And in my personal experience, when you cut out the junk food, because you eat a hell of a lot of junk food, and so when you eat a bunch of junk food, you have to buy a bunch of junk food. Now, yes, individually, each unit of thing that you buy is inexpensive, but the cumulativeness of all that Coke and chips and the whole shebang, take all that pool of money you spent on that and now buy steak, now buy eggs, now buy cheese. You see what I'm saying? That you can allocate those funds to things that now you won't have to eat as much of. Now, there might be a transitionary period. You guys know when you go keto, you go carnivore, you kind of have to ease into it. But once you're there, you're not spending all that money on the junk food anymore. In fact, I did the analysis myself on my own diet, and I looked at what I was spending on junk food prior to going on the Atkins diet, and then the amount of money like what I spend on food today. And it was upwards of 5 to 6 times the amount of money I spend on food today. And I get good quality food now, chicken and beef and eggs and butter, on and on and on and on and on. And yet those are the so-called expensive foods. So we have to like redefine in people's heads what is expensive. Look at what you're actually spending on fast food and junk food at the grocery store and all the things that you eat in a typical week on your ultra processed food diet. And now let's take a look at what you can get with that same money that's going to give you the best nutritional bang for your buck. And that's the answer here. Mark goes on to say, children, poorer white people, and especially people of color are the primary targets of ultra-processed food sales. You know what really disappointed me was when I found out the WIC program and the welfare programs for the less fortunate, they don't allow you to get certain foods that would be healthy. They do allow fruits and vegetables, by the way, but meat, they have to kind of limit the amount of meats that they have, and because it has to follow the dietary guidelines, it tends to be the leaner meats and not the healthier ones, and they let all kinds of junk food get bought with those food stamps. It's gross. It's disgusting to me. Why let the very people who need help more than ever before to eat as well as they possibly can, because but for that help they wouldn't be able to afford food and they would be forced into the junk food, why give them free reign to have junk food? If they want to buy it with the little bit of money they have outside of what they're getting in the assistance, so be it. But I think if you're getting assistance, it should be real food that they get. There are 5 fast food restaurants for every supermarket in the U.S. I'm trying to think. So I've got a supermarket over here, and I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's another supermarket that way. 1, 2. Oh my gosh, it is so true. Like there's 5 fast food restaurants for every supermarket. That's shocking. And listen to this. They're found more in poor areas than in wealthy areas, talking about fast food restaurants. So-called food deserts, areas where healthy and affordable food choices are basically nil, are better labeled as areas of food apartheid and are found more often in poor areas, especially those residents who are people of color. It's money that brings supermarkets and good food options to a neighborhood, and even bringing a new grocery store to a lower income neighborhood does not improve things much if the people's income remains low. Now that's very interesting. That's an opportunity, by the way. If there's an entrepreneur out there who can figure out that one, where you can put some kind of grocery availability, even if it's like seconds of food products that they could bring to that to make it more, cost effective for people to come in and shop. No, it won't be the best of the food, but it'll be like the ugly fruit and vegetables. It'll be like the meat that is close to the end date. It could easily happen because there's so much food wastage at the grocery stores. They could then allocate those foods before they spoil, before they just throw them away or whatever, and allocate them to this other kind of grocery store. So that could be something that a primary grocery store could invest in making happen, and then have this as an adjunct to be in those poorer neighborhoods. Where there's a will, there's always a way out of these things. The primary determinant of the quality of diet is your income, not your ignorance, not your intelligence, and not your will. With 12% of Americans going hungry every day and millions of households with children uncertain that they'll be able to feed their kids, the choice for those people is often between eating processed foods or going without food at all. I think in that instance, you eat the processed food. You have no choice. But to me, to live in a prosperous country like the United States, and for there to be 12% of Americans, and I'm assuming with all that's happened the past year, that number's only going to go up. People losing their businesses, losing their jobs, that 12% will probably jump to 20%, 20-something percent, possibly this year. And in that case, if that's all they can do, although I disagree that that's all, I suppose, again, churches and other companies and things could come up with a program that could help these people. But if that's your choice, processed food, to survive. At least they're fortified with some nutrients in there, better than going indefinitely without eating. Now, I'm a big fan of fasting, but I don't want people to be forced into fasting simply because they don't have access to food. With each passing generation, unhealthful diets will become normal. That's what's happened, guys. I was a kid not that long ago, very long time ago, in the 1970s and 80s. And when I was a kid, this kind of eating was normal. This is what I grew up with. It's what I knew. And today, it's not normal to me because I've chosen better and I've seen the ramifications. But for a lot of people, this is still a very normal diet. Food preferences begin to be shaped in utero. Oh my gosh, my mom was almost 300 pounds when she had me. So I know she was packing on some crap. Well, you got to feed the baby. Got to make sure the baby is there. And I was just talking to her recently. She's like, yeah, you were supposed to be born in late November and they kept you in there another month. Went through Christmas Day. You were already in there for 10 months. I'm like, get this baby out of me. And finally I came 2 days after Christmas. 11 pounds? I was a big boy because mama was eating and eating and eating the junk food. One study found that mothers with varied diets who breastfed and weaned their children with normal food create much different eaters than mothers with standard American diets who rely on formula and baby food. My mom used formula and baby food. And I was also a C-section, which also comes with its own consequences to your health. When we began to feed our children as marketers dictated, pushing the gloss of convenience and modern life, the cycle spiraled out of control. We sacrificed our health at the altar of convenience. Think about that one. Our future health was basically sacrificed all at this altar of wanting to have things convenient and easy. The microwave foods came around. Go buy fast food. Today it's Uber Eats and DoorDash. It's so easy to just have food, bang, just comes right to you. It's too easy. And it's that convenience that keeps people fat. Only good policy can rescue us, but government has largely been part of the problem. I think the dietary guidelines for Americans is a huge part of that problem. Embracing the interests of agribusiness, food processors, marketers, and retailers. They're getting a lot of money. And all those companies funnel money back to the politicians who obediently say, oh, you want us to do this, this, and this? Okay, no problem, watch this. And then they bring out policy that you're just like, wait a minute, you're ignoring science about low carb, but okay. And then they get kickbacks and then they scratch their back and it's this ugly bedfellows. And who gets screwed? We do. We do. To put it more bluntly, the dead weight of the profiteers who poison us and of the plutocrats who abet them. The weight that our society really needs to shed is this shame that we allow ourselves to feel for a problem we did not create. Again, this was in the New York Times, you guys. Go look it up. Why Your New Year's Diet is Doomed by Mark Bittman. He's a former food columnist for the New York Times, and he's the author of a book that's coming out soon called Animal Vegetable Junk. And wow, that was good, huh? All right, let's see what you guys have to say. We're going to come here first to Instagram, then over to Facebook, finally over to Twitch. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Let's see what you have to say about this one here today. Keto Court says, people may not think they're healthy, but I deal with my parents acting like I'm abusing my kids just by suggesting I need to limit all the junk with my kids. Yeah, I don't understand, and I have other friends in my life, Keto Court, who have young children, and they do the same thing that you're doing. And they at least try to titrate back on the junk, or at least make junk not the primary thing that they feed them. And then the older generation is like, oh, just let them be kids. And I'm thinking, yeah, but look at what you're putting on these kids once they become adults. You're setting themselves up to be addicted, to be chronically ill, to be obese. You're just setting them up. I would have loved it when I was a kid to have been offered real food, to have been told like what I know now when I was 7 years old. I would not be struggling with fighting some things in my own weight today had I been given that information then. And so, yeah, it's tough. It's tough, especially when it's your own parents that are doing the poo-pooing on you. Britt says you walk into pretty much any grocery store, cookies and cakes are right there. Yeah, it's everywhere. Cookies, cakes, pies, junk food galore. And it's everywhere. And then to get to the good stuff, you got to go all the way to the back in the meat section. That's pretty much what you have to do. It's mental warfare, Britt says. Yeah. Val says, I think it's just being pushed at us so much through media and education and health professionals that we just believe it. If you tell people something often enough, they believe it. Yeah. And Val, that's why I think it's so hard that once people get that ingrained belief about something, it's hard to undo it. It's almost like trying to tell people, you know, that Hitler guy, he was a really nice guy. Well, nobody's going to believe it. He wasn't, by the way. He was not a nice guy. But let's say it was a lie. And people, you're telling them, oh, he's good now. Oh, he was a good guy. Nobody's going to believe you because it's so firmly ensconced in their brain that he was a bad guy. Same thing has happened with red meat, for example. They have vilified red meat so hard. They have said saturated fat is like the worst thing you could possibly consume. So much, so often, people just across the board believe it. And I don't know how you undo that. Prague Queen says that is so cool that you test out processed foods on your chickens first to know if it's legit. What other cool facts can you tell us about what you do with your chickens other than eat their eggs? Well, I love watching them. They are a hoot and a handy. I do feed them mealworms. Sometimes in the summertime when it's hot, I will chase them around with a water hose to watch them scatter, but they love getting wet when it's hot because they're like panting because it's so hot. Nowadays it's so cold out there, they're doing all they can just to stay warm. But I do chicken videos on Jimmy Rants every once in a while, so stay tuned for that. Joshua said, I filled my freezers with meat during 9/1 DIVOC. Yes, local hookup. That's awesome. Me too, brother. Holly says, I gained 30 pounds twice after Weight Watchers. The proper human diet saved me. Ketovore, carnivore. That's awesome. Britt says the government's now talking about taxing meat. Yeah, I don't understand other than they still think meat is somehow unhealthy. I don't know how that will become public policy without some major pushback from a lot of people. A lot of people. I know Sean Baker will be very vocal about that one if it comes to fruition. All right, thank you, Instagram. Let's pop over here now to Facebook, and we'll be over to you guys here at Twitch here in a second. What's up, Facebook? What you got for me? 200 IU of sprayed-on vitamin D on Fruit Loops. No thanks, says Brian. Exactly, Brian. That's what they do. They put these nutrients. What's funny to me is almost all processed foods immediately strip all the natural nutrients that are in whatever it is that they had. Then they fortify it by adding it back in. And I remember as a kid, like hearing about cereal fortified with 12 essential nutrients and vitamins. And I'm going, oh, wow, that's cool. But little did I know in my youth, fortified meant they stripped what was natural in there out of it. So they had to add back in. Like literally, I don't think they could have got away with it if they didn't fortify. And see, here's the thing too. They know the body has specific nutrients that it needs to survive in a day. And so when they strip it of the natural nutrients in there and then they put these other synthetic nutrients in there, it's meant to keep you just alive enough to keep buying their food until the blood sugar and insulin and inflammation and all the everything else that happens from eating that stuff gets so out of control that you develop chronic disease. but you don't eat it and immediately get sick. It doesn't develop until years, maybe decades down the line. And by then, you're fully addicted. You've already made them billions upon billions of dollars. So they got what they needed out of you. And you were the poor pawn that was the victim of that. All right, thank you, Facebook. Let's pop over here now to Twitch. What's up, Twitch? See what we can get from you guys. Hello, hello. Sometimes it is a combination of no real support from family and all the fake diet foods, plus, as you say, no real food available, especially at most restaurants. It is a recipe for disaster, isn't it? Cariana says, and like 6 companies that own every bit of the media, why has there been no antitrust talk? Yeah, I hear ya. Anna says, I'm just a little older than you, Jimmy, and I would be the only kid in my class that didn't have Doritos or chips for my snack. My mom actually packed food as my snack. I was also the kid in class who was more alert after snack time. Yeah, I wish, again, if I knew then what I know now, I'd have been 10 million times smarter than I was. And I actually wasn't a bad student, but I know I would have been a much better student had I not had crappy garbage brain. Marcus says, I think Big Food follows the same business model as Big Tobacco. Yeah, Mark said as much in his article. Exact same model. But look what happened to Big Tobacco. They finally had to have warnings put on there. They can't advertise on television anymore. I would love to see all of that happen. It's easy to eat keto carnivore at fast food places. They'll gladly sell burgers with no bun. Yeah, burgers with no bun is a big one, but just really meat or any kind of like animal-based food, protein, and then if you choose to have some vegetables, most of them have some non-starchy vegetables. The challenge you're going to have is butter or some other source of fat. And be sure when they cook your steak on a grill or whatever, tell them don't cook it in vegetable oil. A lot of times, and I used to be a cook back in college, we would put vegetable oil on the grill and then cook the hamburgers and stuff on top of that. So when they cook it, tell them wipe, and I used to have customers do this in the early 90s. Wipe down the grill first, then put the meat directly on the grill. Don't let any vegetable oil on there, because the last thing you want is seed oils on the meat that you're consuming at a restaurant. That's why restaurants are a little bit hit or miss. Just make sure you're very clear about what your wishes are. And trust me, I can taste vegetable oil if it gets on there. I'm surprised the New York Times published the piece you reviewed. It's too truthful. Well, Mark Bittman has a great reputation with them. He's been with them a very long time. I've always loved his food and health articles. And yeah, he was spot on. And it makes me excited about his book, Animal Vegetable Junk. I definitely want to interview him all about it. But guys, big tech, free pass on the processed foods. But I'm hoping that getting this out there educates people so that they know why they're fat and why they struggle to stay on their weight loss New Year's resolution every single year. It's by design. They are forcing your hand. And here's one more thing I did not read in his article, but it's true. When you eat the crappy garbage, you eat it for a period of time until you realize, oh my gosh, what am I doing to myself? You gain weight, you get sick, blah, blah, blah. So what do? You go on some diet. Well, you go on some diet that you've heard about. All the diet companies and all the diet foods are owned by the junk food companies. So they get you coming and going, coming and going. Meanwhile, they're making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars on both sides of this. Just keep that in mind. And that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, engage live in the content. Come follow me over here on Instagram. I am Jimmy Rants over on Instagram. Follow me there. We are live there Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being here today. We also simulcast live on Facebook and on Twitch. You can watch the replay right here on IGTV on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. We also have it up over on Twitch. Just as soon as it's over, it's available for replay on Twitch. Remember, on Twitch, it's an app you can download, and just follow me, my username there, Jimmy Moore Rants. So thank you for all your engagement, you guys who watch live on the Twitch app. And if you're sick of some of the games being played, the censorship on social media, Twitch is definitely the place for you to go to. So go check it out. You can also watch the replay over at YouTube, and just type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Oh, by the way, today is Livin' La Vida Low Carb Show, Jimmy Rants on there today. And the episode is the audio version of one of my recent rants about that study looking at 1 egg a day causing all these problems in your health. Yeah, we break that one down pretty well for you, and that airs today on the Livin' La Vida Low Carb Show, llvlc.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then finally, go to jimmyrants.com, and that's where you can see all the past episodes of Jimmy Rants. No matter what happens, that's going to be my home. I'm still working on maybe someday going live from jimmyrants.com. If you know what breaks loose here on traditional social media channels, just know I will probably try to go live, not just on Twitch, but also at jimmyrants.com. So stay tuned for that as well. All right, guys, that's it for today. Tomorrow, I will be reading from a study that was published in the World Journal of Diabetes, and it's all about the ketogenic diet and ketone bodies, and specifically the concentration of ketone bodies being heart protective. We've heard about ketosis being bad for your heart and being unhealthy. Well, you're going to find out there's a new study that says it's actually just the opposite. So that'll be coming your way tomorrow. So until then, we'll see you then. All right, sorry to cover your camera there at the end, Twitch, but you're so close. I had to move you in close. All right, so we're going to end this.